The chamber of the Galactic Council was a place of wonder and fear. It was built on a massive station that floated between stars, where light from distant suns streamed through shining glass walls. Delegates from hundreds of worlds sat in high seats, their voices buzzing like an ocean of languages. Some spoke in clicks, some in growls, others in deep humming tones. It was a chorus of power, the voices of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. And there, standing at the very center of the circle, was humanity. Ambassador Jonathan Reeves stood alone, his figure small compared to the towering aliens around him. He wore no armor, no weapon, only a simple dark suit with the crest of Earth on his chest. His hands were steady at his sides, but his heart carried the weight of billions. For the first time in history, Earth had been invited into this grand chamber. It should have been a moment of pride. Instead, it was a trial. The Karzul warlord rose from his seat. His armor was black steel, carved with scars of 100 battles. His horns curved upward like blades, and his eyes glowed with cold fire. When he spoke, his voice rolled like thunder, shaking the chamber. "Humans," he growled, "you are not worthy of these halls. You are weak. You are latecomers to the stars. You cling to your fragile world like children to a mother's hand. You lack the strength to rule yourselves, let alone stand among us." A rumble of agreement followed. Other delegates nodded. Some laughed softly, their voices sharp as knives. The sound cut through Reeves, but he did not flinch. The warlord continued, lifting his heavy blade and pointing it toward the human envoy. "You mistake passion for power. You mistake stubbornness for strength. Your people live short lives, burning quickly and fading. You cannot endure the wars of the galaxy. When true fire comes, you will kneel. You will break." The chamber erupted with noise. Some aliens clapped their claws against the tables. Others shouted words of scorn in their own tongues. The word "weak" echoed again and again, bouncing off the walls like a cruel chant. Reeves stood in silence. He did not argue. He did not shout. He looked around the chamber, his eyes moving from one mocking face to another. He saw contempt, pity, and amusement. But what they did not see, what they could never see, was the fire inside him. He remembered Earth, the mountains that pierced the skies, the oceans that stretched without end, the deserts that tested every breath. He remembered the wars humanity had already endured, wars of steel, wars of fire, wars of ideas. He remembered the pain, the sacrifices, the endless rising after every fall. At last, when the chamber grew quiet again, Reeves spoke. His voice was calm, almost soft, but it carried across the vast hall. "You call us weak," he said, "because you do not understand us. You measure strength in size of fleets and weight of weapons and years of empire. But that is not where our power lies." He took one step forward. His voice grew stronger, steadier, like iron forming in fire. "You see our short lives as a curse. We see them as fuel. Because our time is brief, we fight harder. Because our days are numbered, we love fiercely. Because we have suffered, we endure." The Karzul warlord sneered, but Reeves did not stop. His eyes blazed now, not with anger, but with unshakable certainty. "You say we will kneel when fire comes. I tell you this, push us to the edge and you will see what humanity truly is. We may bend, we may bleed, but when the storm breaks, we do not fall." He raised his head high, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Pray you never find out what happens when Earth answers." The council fell silent. For the first time, no one laughed. The warning was ignored. The Galactic Council did nothing, and the words of Ambassador Reeves were brushed aside like whispers in a storm. To the great powers of the galaxy, Earth was too small, too young, too fragile to matter. And to the Karzul warlords, those words were not a warning at all. They were a challenge. The invasion came without mercy. One cold morning, the skies above Earth split open. The first Karzul ships arrived like shadows blotting out the sun. Their warships were vast, mountains of iron drifting in the heavens. They moved with the silence of predators, and when they struck, it was with a violence humanity had never known. Lasers brighter than lightning carved through orbital stations. Entire fleets of human ships built with hope and pride were torn apart in moments. Carriers broke in half, shattering into burning fragments that rained across the oceans. Soldiers screamed across broken channels, their final words lost to static. Then the cities were attacked. New York trembled under thunderous blasts. Tokyo vanished beneath a wall of fire. In Africa, drones swarmed like locusts, their claws cutting through steel and stone. Towers fell, streets burned, and skies filled with black smoke. The world that had once been alive with lights, voices, and dreams turned into a battlefield. The Karzul broadcast their message on every channel, their words echoing through every broken radio, every glowing screen. Kneel, humans. Kneel before the strong. Your world belongs to us now. But Earth did not kneel. Yes, there was fear. Mothers clutched children in the ruins of homes. Fathers stood at shattered windows, staring at the night sky now filled with enemy fire. Soldiers fought battles they could not win, retreating street by street, step by step, but never surrendering. Governments fractured, leaders argued, and plans failed. Yet in the silence of despair, something deeper stirred. In shelters below ground, in basements of broken buildings, in the hearts of the survivors, humanity remembered. They remembered their own history, a history written in struggle. They remembered wars that burned continents, diseases that killed millions, disasters that tested every breath. Again and again, humanity had stood on the edge of extinction, and again they had endured. It began with whispers. A pilot in a burning cockpit sent a final message before crashing into an enemy cruiser. A group of miners trapped underground turned their drills into weapons. In a refugee camp, children sang old songs to keep their families from breaking. Every act of resistance was like a spark in the dark. Small, fragile, but together they began to light a fire. Ambassador Reeves watched from the ruins of Geneva, where the first council buildings had fallen. His hair was gray, his suit torn, but his voice remained strong. Speaking to a group of survivors, he told them, "They say we are weak, but weakness does not rise from ashes. Weakness does not hold on when everything is lost. We are not broken. We are the storm that has not yet come." The people listened. They believed. And belief spread faster than fire. The Karzul saw Earth as already defeated, a planet crushed under their heel. But what they did not see was the gathering will, the quiet strength of billions who refused to bow. From the ashes of shattered cities, humanity prepared to answer. The first chapter of the war had ended in blood and fire, but a new chapter was beginning, one the galaxy would never forget. And in that silence, Earth whispered back to the invaders, "We are not weak. You will see." The invasion tore across the world like a storm with no end. Entire nations were shattered. Fields that once grew food burned black. Oceans filled with smoke and wreckage. Humanity was scattered, broken, and bleeding. But in that darkness, something unexpected began. It started in São Paulo. The city lay in ruins, its towers reduced to broken steel and stone. A small group of engineers, survivors of a collapsed university, refused to hide. They scavenged metal from the rubble, stripped power cores from destroyed drones, and built something crude. A railgun held together with wires, magnets, and stubborn hope. When a Karzul dropship landed to secure the area, the humans fired. The shot cut through the alien hull like a spear of lightning. The dropship crashed in flames, its soldiers never touching the ground. News of that act traveled by whispers, radios, and stolen frequencies. Humanity had struck back. In the deserts of Nevada, a team of retired miners and soldiers worked together. They knew the mountains like the lines on their hands. With explosives and drills, they lured Karzul walkers into narrow valleys. When the towering machines entered, the mountains collapsed upon them, burying the enemy under stone. The desert winds carried the dust for days, a silent grave for invaders. In Europe, resistance fighters learned to move through broken cities like ghosts. At night, they lit no fires. By day, they struck quickly and vanished into tunnels and ruins. Children carried messages faster than machines. Farmers hid soldiers in barns and fields. No one was too small to fight. In orbit above Earth, pilots who had lost their ships refused to stop. Some flew crippled craft with half-dead engines, steering them into enemy cruisers. They knew it meant death, but their sacrifice tore holes in the fleet. Each explosion in the sky was more than destruction. It was a symbol, a reminder that humanity still fought. Every act was a spark. Alone, they seemed small, but together they began to form a fire. The Karzul commanders grew frustrated. They had expected humans to kneel, to surrender when cities burned. Instead, every day brought new resistance, new tricks, new defiance. For every soldier they killed, 2 more rose from the ashes. For every city they destroyed, the ruins themselves became weapons. Ambassador Reeves, now hidden with resistance leaders in a mountain bunker, listened to the reports. His heart ached at the cost, at the millions already lost. Yet his voice carried hope. "Look at them," he told the Council of Survivors. "They call us weak. But weakness does not build weapons from ruins. Weakness does not turn despair into strength. This is who we are. This is humanity." And across the world, others began to believe the same. A mother in India, holding her children close, taught them to sing through the sounds of bombardment, giving them courage instead of fear. A doctor in Africa stitched wounds by candlelight, refusing to abandon the injured, whispering, "You will live, because we must all live." A teacher in Russia turned the ruins of her school into a shelter, telling the children stories of ancient heroes, reminding them that humanity had survived worse before. Everywhere, humanity remembered itself. The galaxy had called them weak because their lives were short, their weapons small, their empires non-existent. But now the invaders were seeing the truth. Short lives burned brighter, small hands built faster, and empires were nothing compared to a world united by survival. The Karzul warlord, standing aboard his massive flagship, watched reports of losses flicker on his screen. He snarled, his claws clenching the steel. These humans, they fight as if death is nothing to them. He did not understand. For humanity, death was not the end. Death was sacrifice, and sacrifice lit the way for the living. The sparks had been lit, and soon the fire would come. The war had dragged on for months. Cities were ash, oceans filled with wreckage, and the skies burned with fire. The Karzul still held their mighty fleets above Earth, but something had changed. The invaders no longer walked with pride. Now they moved with caution. For every soldier they sent, 10 more were lost to traps, to raids, to fire from the ruins. But humanity knew small victories were not enough. If Earth was to survive, it needed more than sparks. It needed a storm. In secret bunkers hidden deep beneath mountains and deserts, human scientists and soldiers worked side by side. They had no time, no perfect tools, and no luxury of safety. Every invention was born in desperation, every weapon built with trembling hands. Yet desperation sharpened their minds and anger drove their hearts. At last, from the ruins of old war labs came humanity's answer. It began with the sky. Orbital rail platforms, once hidden as defense projects, were reactivated. For years they had waited in silence, disguised among satellites. Now they awoke. Long rods of tungsten were fired down from orbit, each one falling with the force of a meteor. Cities occupied by Karzul soldiers were turned into craters of flame and smoke. The ground shook as if Earth itself had chosen to fight. Next came the volcanoes. In South America, scientists and miners placed charges deep in the earth. They forced dormant mountains to roar awake. Rivers of fire spilled across enemy lines. Ash darkened the sky, choking the machines that had once marched with ease. The invaders had weapons that could destroy ships, but none that could stop a planet from burning beneath their feet. The oceans, too, became weapons. Old submarines, thought useless against spacefaring fleets, carried nuclear warheads into alien command ships resting above the seas. When they detonated, the waters rose in waves taller than buildings, swallowing soldiers and machines alike. The world itself was fighting. They called it the Firestorm Offensive. Humanity did not strike with elegance or precision. There was no clean war, no honor in the way the Karzul defined it. Earth fought with chaos, with fire, with storms that did not stop. The skies glowed red. Forests burned into walls of flame that swallowed advancing armies. Storms of ash and smoke turned day into night. Explosions lit the seas like lightning. From space, the planet looked scarred and furious, as if the very soil had declared war. For the first time, the Karzul began to retreat. Their commanders had never faced such defiance. They had prepared for fleets, for soldiers, for weapons of order and logic. What they faced instead was madness, a species that turned its own world into a weapon rather than kneel. Ambassador Reeves, listening to the reports from the bunker, closed his eyes. His heart ached for the lives lost, for the burning forests, for the cities swallowed in fire. Yet he knew this was the only way. With a heavy voice, he whispered to those around him, "They forced our hand. They called us weak. But this is humanity's truth. When cornered, we do not bow. We burn." Across the world, survivors lifted their heads. They saw the flames not only as destruction, but as hope. For every fire that consumed the land, it consumed the enemy as well. For every storm that tore through the skies, it tore holes in the invader's pride. The Karzul warlord, standing aboard his flagship, stared at Earth below. The planet glowed with storms, with volcanoes, with rivers of molten fury. His claws tightened on the rail. "This world is cursed," he growled. "It fights like no other." He was wrong. Earth was not cursed. Earth was human, and humanity had finally shown its fury. The sparks had become fire, and now the firestorm raged. The firestorms had changed everything. Where once the Karzul marched with arrogance, now they stumbled through ash and flame. Their machines, built for clean battles in open space, choked in the smoke of burning forests and collapsed under the shifting earth. Their soldiers, bred for conquest, found themselves hunted by shadows in ruins they could not understand. But humanity did understand. From the deserts to the seas, from the mountains to the cities, resistance fighters grew bolder. No longer did they fight only to survive. Now they fought to win. In the jungles of South America, hidden among vines and mist, guerrilla fighters ambushed entire enemy platoons. They struck like ghosts, then vanished into green shadows. Karzul soldiers who once laughed at fragile humans now feared every tree, every sound in the dark. In the ruins of London, snipers lay silent in shattered towers. Their bullets could not pierce alien armor, but their patience was deadlier than steel. They learned to aim for joints, for weak points in helmets, for the cracks that arrogance had left unguarded. One by one, enemy commanders fell, their forces left confused and leaderless. Above Earth, space was no longer a place of Karzul control. Human fleets, though broken and small, fought with madness. Freighters were turned into fire ships, packed with explosives and hurled into enemy carriers. Pilots flew half-destroyed craft straight into the heart of battles, laughing through the static as they rammed into warships 10 times their size. For the first time, the invaders began to pull back. The Karzul warlord, once so certain of his victory, now watched his fleet grow weaker. On his command screens, the glowing red marks of enemy losses spread like blood. His generals argued in fear. "The humans do not fight with reason," one said. "They destroy themselves just to destroy us. It is madness," but the warlord knew the truth, though he would not say it aloud. It was not madness. It was will. A will he could not break. Ambassador Reeves sat in a darkened war room deep in the Alps. His face was worn, his hair white with ash, but his voice carried strength. Around him sat resistance leaders from every corner of the world. Farmers, teachers, soldiers, scientists, humanity itself. He told them, they said we would kneel, yet here we stand. They called us weak, yet here we fight. This war is not over, but for the first time it is ours to win. And the leaders nodded, for they had seen the same truth. Humanity was no longer only surviving. Humanity was rising, even children played their part. In Poland, a boy no older than 12 carried coded messages across ruins, slipping past patrols with nothing but courage. In Egypt, young girls helped hide weapons in baskets of bread, feeding both their families and the resistance. Every hand, young or old, strong or weak, was a weapon in its own way. The galaxy had believed humanity was fragile because of their short lives. But those short lives burned like stars, fierce and unyielding. The Karzul learned that humans did not fear death. They used it. Every sacrifice lit another torch. Every fallen fighter became a reason to fight harder. One night, high above the Atlantic, a massive battle raged. The last of Earth's great carriers faced a Karzul warship the size of a city. The human ship was torn, its engines failing, its weapons nearly silent. Yet instead of retreating, the crew made their choice. They locked the engines, aimed at the enemy flagship, and burned forward at full speed. The impact shook the skies. Both ships were consumed in fire, but the enemy fleet broke apart, leaderless, scattered. From that night on, the humans knew the tide had turned. The Karzul had come to conquer a fragile world. Instead, they found themselves facing a storm that refused to end. For the first time in the war, the invaders were afraid. The war did not end in silence. It ended in fire, ash, and broken pride. The Karzul fleets, once feared across the galaxy, now limped through the stars. Their ships were scarred, their armies shattered. They had tried to chain Earth, but instead Earth had burned chains into their flesh. At last, the Galactic Council could no longer ignore the war. Too many worlds whispered the same question. What are the humans? The council chamber, once filled with laughter at Earth's weakness, was now heavy with silence. The Karzul demanded to be heard. Humanity, too, was summoned. When Ambassador Reeves stepped into the chamber again, the air itself seemed to tremble. He was older now, his hair white, his suit torn and patched. His face bore the lines of sleepless nights, yet his eyes carried the same fire as before. Around him walked soldiers, scientists, and survivors, not nobles, not kings, just people who had lived through fire. The Karzul warlord stood across from him. His armor was cracked, his horn scarred, and his voice no longer rolled with pride but with bitterness. "These humans are a plague," he growled. "They burn their own world, destroy themselves, and call it strength. They do not fight with honor. They fight with madness," the council murmured, torn between fear and awe. The speaker of the council, an ancient being of shimmering light, turned to Reeves. "You have won, but look at your world. Continents burned, oceans poisoned, cities turned to dust. You may have survived, but at what cost? Do you not see the ruin you bring upon yourselves?" The chamber waited. All eyes turned to the human envoy. Reeves stood tall, though his body ached with every breath. He looked not at the speaker, not at the warlord, but at the gathered assembly of countless species. His voice was steady, heavy with grief yet unshaken. "You speak of ruin," he said softly. "Yes, our lands are scarred. Our skies are dark. We have buried more than we can count. But do you not see? We still stand." He took a step forward, his voice rising. "You told us we were weak. You told us we would kneel. But weakness does not endure when fire consumes the sky. Weakness does not rise when empires fall upon it. We may burn, yes, but from our ashes we rise stronger." His words echoed through the chamber. Some leaned forward, listening with wide eyes. Even the Karzul fell silent. Reeves lifted a trembling hand, pointing toward the stars above the glass dome. "Strength is not measured in how many fleets you own. It is not the weight of your weapons or the length of your empires. True strength is found in those who will not break, even when the world around them falls. That is humanity. That is Earth." His voice cracked then, heavy with emotion, but he did not falter. "You say we are a plague. Perhaps we are. A plague on tyranny. A plague on those who believe power gives them the right to rule others. We are short-lived, yes, but in those short lives we burn brighter than any star." The chamber fell into silence. Not a whisper, not a laugh, not even a breath disturbed the stillness. At last even the Karzul warlord lowered his eyes. His pride was broken, his fury hollow. He had seen what humans were. He had learned the lesson written in fire and blood. Ambassador Reeves stood alone in the center of the chamber, his figure small among giants, yet unshakable. His final words carried across the hall, soft but powerful. "Remember this day. Remember what happens when you call humanity weak." And no one dared to answer. The war was over. Not with a truce, not with surrender, but with silence. The Karzul had retreated, their fleets broken, their pride in ashes. The Galactic Council looked on, wary, as Earth stood scarred but unbowed. Cities lay in ruins, forests were burned, oceans scarred, and skies darkened by smoke. Yet humanity had endured. Humanity had survived. Across continents, survivors began the long task of rebuilding. In the rubble of New York, children climbed over broken walls, laughing as they collected shards of glass and metal. In the deserts of Africa, farmers planted seeds in blackened soil, stubborn life pushing through ash. In Europe, old buildings became schools again, where teachers whispered stories of courage to young faces wide with wonder. They told the story of the Firestorm offensive, of railguns built from scrap, of volcanic eruptions weaponized, of pilots who rammed enemy ships knowing they would not return. They spoke of mothers and fathers, children and teachers, all rising together to fight when the world seemed lost. Each story became a legend. Each legend became a spark. In orbit, satellites gleamed like memorials for the fallen. Humanity called them the stars of fire, each one honoring the brave who had given their lives to defend their home. They shone in silent testimony to the galaxy. Earth had survived because of its people. The Karzul, though gone, were not forgotten. Across the stars, whispers spread. Tyrants who had once thought humans fragile and weak now paused. They remembered the firestorms, the relentless resistance, the courage that burned brighter than any weapon. Humanity had proven that no empire, no matter how vast, could crush a species that refused to bow. Ambassador Reeves walked through the streets of what had once been London, now a city of rebuilding. He touched a wall scarred by laser fire, feeling its heat from the past. Children ran past him carrying books and plants, and he smiled. Though the world had been broken, life had returned. Humanity would rise again, stronger, wiser, and unshakable. One evening, standing on a hill overlooking the ruined skyline of Tokyo, he spoke to the survivors who had gathered. We were called weak, he said softly. We were told we could not endure. And yet, look at us. We are here. We are alive. We fight, we rebuild, and we will never ever kneel to anyone who believes they are stronger than our will. The survivors cheered, their voices carrying across the city, across the mountains, across the planet itself. Humanity had learned a lesson the galaxy would not forget. True strength was not in weapons or ships or empires. True strength was in courage and endurance, in the will to rise when everything seemed lost. Beyond Earth, in the dark expanse of space, the legend spread. Ships of other civilizations carried stories of humans who had turned their own planet into a weapon, rather than surrender. The galaxy learned that humanity was not fragile, not weak, not insignificant. Humanity was a force of nature, unpredictable, relentless, and unbreakable. And on Earth, life went on. Children grew up hearing the tales of the Firestorm offensive. Scientists explored the ruins, learning from the past. Soldiers trained not to conquer, but to protect. And everywhere, people looked at the night sky and remembered. They remembered the firestorms. They remembered the courage. They remembered that humanity, though small and short-lived in the grand cosmos, could shine brighter than any star. Earth had been called weak. But the galaxy had learned the truth. Earth does not kneel. Earth does not surrender. Earth answers with fire, and that fire would never die.